найти себя,
to find oneself, to become
очнуться,
aware, to
оглянуться,
look about,
увидеть
to
след,
see
что
the
тебя
traces
проложен,
left before you,
своим
to
истокам
touch the
сердцем
place when your
прикоснуться.
heart springs from.
Да,
True,
путь к
the
себе
path to
нелегок, но
finding
возможен.
yourself isn't easy,
Когда начинается этот
but
путь к
it's
себе?
possible.
Когда припоминаешь
When
услышанную в
do
раннем
we
детстве
begin
молитву
to know
бабушки?
ourselves?
Когда всплывает в
When we
памяти рассказ
remember
деда о
the
старом
prayers
мудром раввине
grandmother
из
whispered
местечка под
in our
Черкасами?
childhood.
Когда
When a
задумываешься,
memory
кто ты
swims to
и
the
где
soft
твои
face
корни?
of a story
Или когда
told by
однажды,
our
движимый неясным
grandfather
чувством,
of a
идешь в старую
rabbi who
синагогу,
lived near
куда
Cherkasy.
когда-то
When we
ходили твои
think of who
родные.
we are
В 2003
and
году
where
я
our
сюда
roots are,
зашел первый раз.
or when, moved by an
проходил
emotion
мимо,
we
я
don't
поехал в
understand, we
Биробиджан.
go to the old synagogue, a place that our relatives
Проходя мимо, я
once
увидел
visited.
синагогу,
I came here for the first time in
что
2003.
вообще
I was
как бы
walking by
думал
and saw
всегда,
the synagogue.
часто слышал
I
о
often
синагоге,
heard about the
синагогу,
synagogue
потому
at
что
home.
моя
My
прабабушка
grandmother constantly came here.
ходила,
She took a knapsack with her and came to the synagogue every
как бы
Friday.
у нее было, вот она брала с собой узелок, это струдель, это вареное яичко, 3 рубля. И она каждую пятницу она шла сюда в синагогу. Когда пришел первый раз в эту синагогу, пришел на шаббат.
When I came here for the first time, I came on the Shabbat. I walked in and felt the atmosphere of home. I saw my own childhood, as if I had returned to it, here in this Jewish world. The Jewish world of the synagogue on Mayakovsky Street permitted everything: the old cracked wooden benches, the carved stools, the dog-eared pages of the prayer books, the holy texts carefully handwritten, letters, symbols, and the curves of figures millennia old. One wants to shout, Birebidjan, as far as you are from the brilliant sunsets on the hills of Jerusalem. Yet, even here the seeds of the face of children of Zion have taken root. Paging through the ancient books miraculously preserved in the old cupboards, looking over the homemade hangings, over the Ark of the Covenant, and dent and the redent talits, the current hand of the Birebidjan community. Andrei Lukatsky seems to be trying to gaze into the past, into the far away and yet not so far away 1930s, when Jews came to the Far East looking for a better life, leaving behind all that was familiar. The immigrants of the empire, Solomon's miserable children, setting off to the east on wagons of prayer. Lukatskys and Setas were among the immigrants. We can imagine that among their simple baggage, underneath the trunks and bundles, lay carefully wrapped holy books, tefillin and talits. These talits, soaked in tears and prayer, this is our history. To recreate this history, to understand oneself, and to pass this heritage on to one's son, this is also a part of finding ourselves, of returning to our roots. It is by no accident that Jewish tradition generation after generation passes on the command found in the Passover Haggadah, the historical document that records the exit of Israel from slavery and emergence as a people, and pass it on to your sons. Memories of the past are tied to the future. Here in the old synagogue, history is everywhere, in the six-pointed stars over the Ark of the Covenant, in the Lion's Garden, in Holiest of Holies, of any synagogue, and in the holy text handwritten by the local scribe. And the shutters of the cupboard that hold the text, the love put into their decoration with a simple design of flowers and petals is evident. And the curtains covering the cupboard, these are a continuation of history. These are new, a replacement for the old threadbare curtains, but preserving to these days the hangings donated by the first congregants of the synagogue. Here in this cupboard, the scrolls of the Torah were kept. Unfortunately, only small fragments of the parchment of those first scrolls remain, but the Kabot is a part of history. The Shabbat candlesticks also show the passage of time while reminding one of the Shabbat praise of the congregants of this synagogue for a better life and for the success in the Far East. My grandmother attended the very first synagogue, which was burned. This was told in my family, how my grandmother Baba Lisa came home in the tears and said that synagogue was in flames, that someone had set fire to it. She said crying, and no one knew what to do. My grandmother, grandfather, and great-grandmother lived in constant fear. Due to their Judaism, their nationality, they didn't understand that these are different times. Pogroms no longer take place, but this fear and helplessness was always with them. And yet, regardless of their ancient fear, they continued to go to the synagogue, to this humble holy place, in order to pray to the Most High, to meet the Shabbat, and to fulfill the commandments given by God. Often prayer books in the Torah were hidden under covers of books less than holy, and here this old synagogue we can find witness of this. The names of those first congregants can be found here on the cave tables. For example, this one Baruch Meisler, he was a member of the first synagogue. His personal prayer book has also been preserved, inscribed with his name. Everything we touch has the aroma of a past life, personal accounts of the combined tractor driver. What does this have to do with the synagogue? But in this artifact, we find documented the life of this home, the amounts contributed, expenses for the synagogue's upkeep, and of course, a list of the congregants. Each year the list grew shorter and shorter. Here in the archives we can find the decision by the city council of the lack of practical use and the closing of Birobidzhan synagogue due to a deficiency of believers. So many people fought to keep the synagogue alive in Soviet times. So much discrimination was faced. In order to provide a place for the tired Jew to renew his soul, to sympathize with his comrades in grief, to pray for the souls of his ancestors. These Maccabees of the Far East thought, however, possible to keep their faith alive. Those who came here to page through the holy books and to honor the Shabbat and the ancient custom have long lain in the Jewish cemetery of Birobidzhan, and this is also part of the history. Jewish graves. Is there a country on earth where the stones don't guard you, and where suns don't hang your names, and the letters spew out through moss and dust? We were, we live. They lived, and they didn't recant their faith, but prayed for the well-being and the better life for their loved ones. What else could Lukatska grandmother Baba Lisa pray for? You know, I think she prayed for me. At some moment she sensed my destiny, foresaw that I would also choose this path, that I too would come to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. She must have seen and understood this and prayed for me. I grew up. My grandparents were no longer around, and there were many things I missed. Now I remember all of these things and think to myself, why was I such a fool? I never asked them about anything. It's a great loss, because there was a break in our lives. And when we came to the synagogue, we understood that we don't know anything. I need to study more and more. in order to really understand some things, to understand their depths, understanding and acting. This is another step to finding ourselves. Today here in the community, Lukatsky celebrates the Shabbat and holidays with those who remain true to this place, sanctified by the prayers of their fathers and grandfathers. Donning the talits with the other congregants, he feels a sense of awe before the commands given by God. Reading the blessing over the glass of wine on the Shabbat or a holiday, he remembers the exodus from Egypt and his own exodus from spiritual slavery and unbelief. We all know he has taken us out of slavery. Opening the Bible, I read the history of my people, and I read this book as if it were my own story. We were taught that there is no God, that religion is the opium of the masses, and this sank into my consciousness in childhood. When I began reading, I saw the Messiah. He stood before me, real and alive. I fell to my knees, and that was the beginning of the truth, where I gained the fear of the Lord, which is the Proverbs of Solomon is called the beginning of wisdom. The Torah convinced me it's written, take one step to me, that is to God, and He'll take 10 steps to you. Lukatsky took a step to God on the path to finding himself, and God brought him here, to this house of prayer, out of the unbelief and worldly patience in which he had been lost. This synagogue, this is my reality. I can't separate myself from it. I understood this when I saw Jews who asked me, "Is that you? Where have you been?" I sat down and cried. I understood that this is my family. This worship is for God in response to how we used to live and now we must live by the Torah according to our traditions.
И дальнейшее уже идти вот именно по Торе, идти уже по традициям по нашим.
Жить по Торе.
Now, even Lukatsky's son Venya understands what it means to live according to the Torah. Coming to the synagogue on the Shabbat and holidays, he tries to understand what faith means and God. My son lives with me. He sees my attitudes to everything. If I am hypocritical, if I act honestly before God, with the people around me, this is a holy duty, and my son sees what I do. My first duty is to teach my children, to raise my children in love and understanding of our Creator.
Где-то третьей жизнью, то есть я живу как здесь, так и дома, так и везде себя веду, одинаково, ровно.
Once upon a time, the believers who came to this synagogue couldn't even dream of this possibility, but the heritage of faith that they left has been preserved. The seeds of faith have taken root, and the connection between the generations has been strengthened. This connection, it's felt here. Many people have sought God, have taken a certain route in their lives, much as I did. What will our children learn if they don't see any of these things, if they don't understand that there was a time when all of these had to be hidden? All of these things, ancient things, talits, this furniture, this building, those things that are found here, that exist here, they must be preserved, so that when our grandchildren come here, they will understand that without the Most High, we have nowhere to turn. Going through the archives, Andrei and his helpers are full of the plans for renewing the old Birobidzhan synagogue and preserving all the old books and artifacts, for each item holds the history, life and fate of their predecessors. Andrei's greatest help in preserving this history is his wife Valeria. This is a high mission, and for me, a spiritual one. Sitting here, it's as if we've gone back into the past. Andrei is the grandson of all of these. The connection between the generations is one of the foundations of our life. We are discovering what appears to be an enormous heritage. Here in the old synagogue, there is so much that needs to be studied and organized in order to explain it to those who will visit the synagogue. Preserving this heritage and giving a new life to the old synagogue, this is what the head of and all of its members dream of.
И дать новую жизнь старой синагоге. Об этом мечтает председатель общины Бейт Шува и все прихожане.
4 years ago, an event of historic moment took place here. The community and synagogue acquired a new scroll of the Torah. It was brought from Japan as a gift from the Jewish community in Tokyo. To the singing of the community and guests, the Holy Scriptures took their place in their new home on Mayakovskого, number 7. The old Ark of the Covenant unfolded the scroll with a great gratitude, and every time the Holy Scroll is removed before services, the shutters creak gently, as if they were rejoicing in the new life in this old carved home. We come here in order to glorify God, in order to glorify the Most High, in order to understand who He is.
Об одном сожалеет нынешний председатель общины Бейт Шува Андрей Лукацкий, что всех этих преобразований не увидели его предки, прихожане, чей дух до сих пор...
The one thing Andrei Lukatsky, head of the community, regrets is that his grandparents didn't live to see the renewal of the synagogue. Those early believers, those spirits to this day is preserved in the ancient books. We come back. We've come to our places, to our Judaism. We've returned to it all and began to learn. We've begun to understand it all. How we'd love to be able to tell those faithful ancestors that in addition to this small island of faith, Birobidzhan has another new, beautiful synagogue and the lovely building of the Jewish religions community Freit, where Jewish holidays are celebrated, and clubs meet to study and preserve Jewish customs and traditions. How happy our predecessors would be if they could see the many Jewish dances on the streets and squares of Birobidzhan, performed joyously by hundreds of boys and girls, and how the constant fiddler stands by the fountain playing his melody and calling all to the festival of Jewish culture and art, where one can hear merry klezmer melodies and songs in the mother tongue brought here to the Far East by the first settlers, those immigrants of the empire, Solomon's miserable children, setting off to the east on wagons of prayer. And the little synagogue on Mayakovsky lives in the true understanding of the word, lives, prays, celebrates its holidays, lights the Shabbat candles, and brings people back. When I began to come back to all of this, to my roots, I understood what a difficult path it is, and yet it is a path to be followed to the end. And every day he walks to the old synagogue, because he is going back to himself. And he knows the path to finding yourself isn't easy, but it's possible.